Hello, Pastor Eric here at Ottawa First Assembly in Ottawa, Illinois, and I'm here at our beautiful church today, our church building, and I'm actually filming this on Monday this week, and so I'm trying to get a little bit ahead in my schedule because I've got, I'm doing school right now, so I have statistics and hospitality, and plus I have to, of course, work on sermons and such. So I'm trying to get ahead. Normally Mondays are days that I kind of take for my Sabbath, but for right now, I don't have time to do that. But for you, you're watching this on Thursday. So happy Thursday. I hope you're having a great day, or whenever you're watching this, if you can't get to it when it premieres. So happy that you're with me. And this is week 4 in our series titled The New Exodus, where we are going through the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. This week, we are talking about the importance of worship in our lives. Worship. And we'll talk a little bit more about some misnomers about what worship is, what it isn't, and as we go forward. So I'm excited about this message. I have not spoken about worship since I've been the pastor at Ottawa. So I think it's a great subject, a great topic for us to talk about today. And of course, like with all my most of my midweek videos, what we're going to do is we're going to read through the text, because this week it's not just 2 long lists. So we're going to read through the text of Ezra chapter 3 and Nehemiah chapter 9. Those are the chapters we're going to read through, okay? So we'll go ahead and we will start with Ezra chapter 3. If you want to get your device or your Bible, or, if you just want to listen along, that's what we're going to read first. And then we'll talk about it afterward, okay? Again, worship. The importance of worship in our lives is the topic of this week's series for the new Exodus. Okay, here we go. Ezra chapter 3. Now when the 7th month came and the sons of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. Then Jeshua, the son of Jodak, and his brothers the priests, and Zerubbabel and his brothers arose and built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. So they set up the altar on its foundation, for they were terrified because of the peoples of the lands, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, burnt offerings morning and evening. They celebrated the Feast of Booths, as it is written, and offered the fixed number of burnt offerings daily, according to the ordinance, as each day required. And afterward there was a continual burnt offering, also for the new moons and for all the fixed festivals of the Lord that were consecrated, and from everyone who offered a free will offering to the Lord. From the first day of the 7th month they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, but the foundation of the temple of the Lord had not yet been laid. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters, and food and drink and oil to the Sidonians and to the Tyrians, to bring cedar wood from Lebanon to the sea at Joppa, according to the permission they had from Cyrus, the king of Persia. Verse 8. Now in the 2nd year of their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem, in the 2nd month, Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of their brothers, the priests and the Levites, and all who came from the captivity to Jerusalem, began the work and appointed the Levites from 20 years and older to oversee the work of the house of the Lord. Then Jeshua, with his sons and brothers, stood united with Camdiel and his sons, the sons of Judah, and the sons of Henadad, with their sons, and the brothers, the Levites, to oversee the workmen and the temple of God. Verse 10. Now when the builders had laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests stood in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise the Lord, according to the directions of King David of Israel. They sang, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, saying, "For he is good, for his loving kindness is upon Israel forever." And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. Yet many of the priests and Levites and heads of the fathers' households, the old men who had seen the first temple, wept with a loud voice when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, while many shouted aloud for joy, so that the people could not distinguish the sound of shout of joy from the sound of weeping of the people. For the people shouted with a loud shout, and the sound was heard far away. Now we're going to talk about that, those people who were weeping and why they were weeping a little bit in here after I read Ezra chapter 9. Okay, because it does speak to what we sometimes see today in churches. And it's something I'm not going to really cover a lot on Sunday. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit here today. Okay, so that's Ezra chapter 3. Next, we are going to go to Nehemiah chapter 9. And also, I want to say, please forgive me if I have a mistake or something. It's very long to record this long without making a mistake or a flub or something like that. And if it's in the beginning or at the end, it's easy to edit out. If it's in the middle, it's harder for me to edit out. So I'm doing my best, because normally when I film these, I have to take 4 takes, because I'm so clumsy or fall off my chair. One of these days I'll put out a blooper video. But all right, let's move on to Nehemiah chapter 9. Now this one is a little bit longer, so it'll take a little bit longer to read. It is 38 verses, and most of it is an actual song to the Lord. Okay, and so we'll talk a little bit about it after we read. So here we go. Nehemiah chapter 9. Forgive me. Nehemiah chapter 9, starting at verse 1. Now on the 24th day of this month, the sons of Israel assembled with fasting and sackcloth and with dirt upon them. The descendants of Israel separated themselves from all foreigners and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquity of their fathers. While they stood in their place, they read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a fourth of the day. And for another fourth, they confessed and worshiped the Lord their God. Now on the Levites' platform stood Jeshua, Bani, Chemdiel, Shabaniah, Boni, B-U-N-N-I, Sherebiah, Bani, B-A-N-I, and Shani. And they cried with a loud voice to the Lord their God. Then the Levites, Jeshua, Chemdiel, Bani, Hashabaniah, I apologize, Sherebiah, Hodiah, Shebaniah, and Pathiah, said, "Arise, bless the Lord your God forever and ever." So, the recap the first 5 chapters. So you have a bunch of people that are mourning. They're in mourning. It says that they have sackcloth, they were fasting, they were in mourning. And then these men stand up and say, hey, arise and bless the Lord. Okay, so it's kind of a call to worship, as it were, beginning in the latter part of verse 5. And this is the song. Oh, may your glorious name be blessed and exalted above all blessing and praise. You alone are the Lord. You have made the heavens, the heaven of the heavens with all their hosts, the earth and all that's on it, the seas and all that's in them. You gave life to all of them, and the heavenly host bows down before you. You are the Lord God. You chose Abram and brought him out of the Ur of Chaldees, and you gave him the name Abraham. You found his heart faithful before you, and you made a covenant with him to give him the land of the Canaanite, of the Hittite, of the Amorite, of the Perizzite, the Jebusite, and the Girgashite, to give it to his descendants. And you have fulfilled your promise, for you are righteous. Verse 9. You saw the affliction of our fathers in Egypt. You heard their cry by the Red Sea. Then you performed signs and wonders against Pharaoh, against all of his servants and all the people of his land. For you knew that they acted arrogantly toward them, and made a name for yourself as it is this day. You divided the sea before them, so they passed through the midst of the ground on the dry ground, and their pursuers you hurled into the depths like a stone into raging waters. And with a pillar of cloud you led them by day, and with a pillar of fire by night, to light for them the way in which they were to go. Then you came down on Mount Sinai, and you spoke with them from heaven. You gave them just ordinances and true laws, good statutes and commandments. So you made known to them your holy Sabbath, and laid down for them commandments, statutes, and law, through your servant Moses. You provided bread from heaven for them for their hunger. You brought forth water from a rock for them for their thirst. And you told them to enter in order to possess the land which you swore to give them. But they, our fathers, acted arrogantly. They became stubborn and would not listen to your commandments. They refused to listen and did not remember your wondrous deeds which you had performed among them. So they became stubborn and appointed a leader to return to their slavery in Egypt. But you are a God of forgiveness, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness. You did not forsake them, even when they made for themselves a calf of molten metal, and said, "This is your God, who brought you up from Egypt," and committed great blasphemies. You in your great compassion did not forsake them in the wilderness. The pillar of cloud did not leave them by day to guide them on their way, nor the pillar of fire by night to light for them the way in which they were to go. You gave your good spirit to instruct them. Your manna you did not withhold from their mouth. You gave them water for their thirst. Indeed, 40 years you provided for them in the wilderness, and they were not in want. Their clothes did not wear out, nor did their feet swell. You also gave them kingdoms and peoples, and allotted them to them as a boundary. They took possession of the land of Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and the land of Og, the king of Bashan. You made their sons numerous as the stars of heaven. You brought them into the land which you had told their fathers to enter and possess. So their sons entered and possessed the land, and you subdued before them the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, and you gave them into their hand, with their kings and the peoples of the land, to do with them as they desired. They captured fortified cities and fertile land. They took possessions of houses full of every good thing, huge cisterns, vineyards, olive groves, fruit trees in abundance. So they ate, they were filled and grew fat, and reveled in your great goodness. But they became disobedient and rebelled against you, and cast your law behind their backs, and killed your prophets who had admonished them, so that they might return to you, and they committed great blasphemies. Therefore you delivered them into the hand of their oppressors who oppressed them. But when they cried to you in the time of distress, you heard from heaven, and according to your great compassion, you gave them deliverers who delivered them from the hand of their oppressors. But as soon as they had rest, they did evil before you. Therefore you abandoned them to the hand of their enemies, so that they ruled over them. When they cried again to you, you heard from heaven, and many times you rescued them according to your compassion, and admonished them in order to turn them back to your law. Yet they acted arrogantly and did not listen to your commandments, but sinned against your ordinances, by which if a man observes them, he shall live. And they turned a stubborn shoulder and stiffened their neck and would not listen. However, you bore with them for many years and admonished them by your Spirit through your prophets, yet they would not give ear. Therefore you gave them into the hand of the people of the lands. Nevertheless, in your great compassion, you did not make an end of them or forsake them, for you are a gracious and compassionate God. Verse 32. Now therefore our God, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who keeps covenant and loving kindness, do not let all the hardships seem insignificant before you. which has come upon us, our kings, our princes, our priests, our prophets, our fathers, and on all your people, from the days of the kings of Assyria to this day. However, you are just in all that has come upon us, for you have dealt faithfully, but we have acted wickedly. For our kings, leaders, priests, and our fathers have not kept your law, or paid attention to your commandments, your admonitions, with which you have admonished them. But they in their own kingdom, with your great goodness that you gave them, with the broad and the rich land which you set before them, did not serve you, or turn from their evil deeds. Behold, we are slaves today, and as to the land which you gave our fathers to eat of its fruit and of its bounty, behold, we are slaves in it. Its abundant produce is for the kings, whom you have set over us because of our sins. They also rule over our bodies, over our castle as they please. So we are in great distress. Verse 38, and this is where it ends. Now because of all this, we are making an agreement in writing, and on the sealed document are the names of our leaders, our Levites, and our priests. So that was, as I said, it was a little bit longer. It was Nehemiah chapter 9, and it was basically one long poem or song in which the people singing it or saying it was basically recounting the history of Israel, is what it was. From the very beginning, the calling of Abraham, down to their slavery in Egypt, Moses calling them out, parting the Red Sea, wandering in the desert for 40 years, so on and so forth, up to where they are today as conscripted servants, basically, or slaves, for lack of a better term, for the Babylonian king. And so that was their history in a nutshell. And what they're saying is that we are once again crying out to you, making a covenant to you, and promising to follow your law. And that is what they're doing here. If you kind of follow the story, you'll see, Israel did good in the Lord's sight. He blessed them. Then they did evil. And so the Lord sent armies to capture them. Then they cried out to the Lord, and the Lord delivered them. Then they did evil, and the Lord sent enemies to capture them. Well, they're hoping to reverse that trend again, doing good in the Lord's sight, rebuilding the temple of Jerusalem, rebuilding the walls, so on and so forth. So that is what Nehemiah chapter 9 is about. And I will say, as you read through the stories in the Old Testament of how the Jewish people vacillated, just even within one generation, it can be frustrating, and we can look at that and we can say, man, how bad were they? But I will tell you, we are no different. On Sunday, we go to church, we'll raise our hands, and we'll worship. And I'll talk about that in a minute. We'll worship, and we'll, feel close to the Lord. And then on Monday morning, or even Sunday afternoon, when we leave the church, we go home, we're watching something we shouldn't watch. We get angry at our wife, or, we get angry at the kids, and we say something that we shouldn't say. And the fact is that we are no different. We really aren't. But because we're living in real time, it doesn't seem as bad as what the Israelites did. But we are just as bad. We can be just as unfaithful to the Lord as the Israelites were, maybe even worse. And here's the thing about that, is that we have no excuse. We are under the new covenant. We don't have to keep the law of Moses. We are under the age of grace, and yet we still struggle. We still don't take our relationship with the Lord seriously. We just don't. And so it's the Nehemiah 9. I really like that. They're worshiping the Lord, asking the Lord to once again reverse their fortune, as it were, for lack of a better term, and to once again allow the Jewish people to prosper and to do well. And I will tell you, not to give you spoilers or anything, but it never really happens. It doesn't. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until the Jewish people got Israel back after World War II that we see that happen again. But even then, that is after Christ came, and they don't worship the Messiah. So, but anyway, all that to say, because after the book of Nehemiah, the Lord goes silent for a long time until Christ comes, but then they reject him. So, but it is good that they were worshiping the Lord, crying out to him, saying, we're making, we're reconsecrating ourselves to the Lord. And so that's really good. Okay. That's awesome. Now let's go back to Ezra, chapter 3. And I wanted to discuss one thing that's in Ezra chapter 3, and then we'll be done. Okay, at the very end of Ezra chapter 3, it says, in verse 12, it says, yet many of the priests and Levites and head of the fathers' households, the old men who had seen the first temple, wept with a loud voice when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, while many shouted for joy, so on and so forth. So here we have a bunch of people, and on Sunday I'm not going to really address this too much. I'm going to more talk about just what is worship, what isn't worship, so on and so forth. So that's the important. But today I wanted to cover this because it's important. If you belong to a church for a long time, and a new pastor comes, or new leader comes, or whatever, and wants to begin to change things, right? Wants to begin to make things new, new programs, new, way of doing things. Oftentimes, that pastor will get lots of pushback over that, lots. And this is what I relate to this story in Ezra. So here we have, the foundation of the temple was finally laid. It had been destroyed decades before, and yet King Cyrus gave the Jews permission to come back, rebuild it. He even paid for it. And despite that, these people, some of these older men, were sitting there weeping because the glory of this particular temple that they built didn't compare to the temple that they had before. Okay? And so here's the problem with that. In doing that, and so focusing on what we had in the past, we end up not being able to appreciate what we have now. For example, in a church, the church I grew up in, okay, they had and a lot of churches go through this, they had in the 1950s and 60s, their church was really, really booming, right? It was really, really booming, doing well, okay? And then new pastors came, and the congregation starting to get a little bit older, and they got in a comfortable place, not wanting anything to change, hoarding their money, not wanting to, get into the community to challenge themselves, right? They were happy with where they were, okay? And they did not want to push the envelope. And so the people of the church, what they did was, why can't we get back to where we were? Why can't it be like that again? Meanwhile, they're sitting there every Sunday, and the new pastor is there or whatever, and there's pushback on any new thing that's proposed. But why can't we get back to what we were? But we don't want to do anything new. Okay? And we see that a lot in our life, and it's no different than problems that we have in our life. Okay? Well, why can't my marriage be as exciting as it was when I first got married? Why can't it be? But I don't want to go see someone to help me, right, with this issue in our marriage. I don't want to do that because only weak people go see someone. But why can't it be as exciting as it was when we first got married? That's another example of what I'm talking about. And so it is important, very important, that and oftentimes I'll say this, that what we think we remember from the past usually wasn't as good as what we think it was. It's like the good old days type of thing, type of mentality. but we're not willing to change anything or to do anything in order to have that revival of sorts, for lack of a better term, in our lives or in the church or whatever. So these men are just sitting there and they're wailing, oh, this isn't nearly as good as it used to be, and they're upset over that. And as a result, they're missing the blessing as of what is going on right now. And so that is what I kind of wanted to bring up. And this is the last thing I'll say. And this is what I'm going to really expound on Sunday. Worship has nothing to do with being in a building and singing songs. That is what my message is going to be about on Sunday. Worship is the condition of our heart. It's where our heart is pointed towards. That is what worship is. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you've made it all the way through, check us out on Facebook, First Assembly of God, Ottawa First Assembly of God on Facebook, on YouTube, Ottawa First Assembly of God, our website. I put out a pastor's blog there. Just look us up online. You'll be able to find us. God bless. Again, this is Pastor Eric, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.